Modern air defense systems are designed to stop incoming threats in seconds. But in this strike, something slipped through. Not one missile, not even a few. Dozens of warheads breaking apart mid-air, turning a single launch into a storm. And by the time people on the ground understood what was happening, it was already too late. So what exactly was this weapon? And more importantly, how did it manage to get past one of the most layered air defense networks in the world? That answer begins with a name that has been quietly circulating in military circles for years, but until now had never been seen in real combat. The Qassem missile. But this is not just another ballistic missile, because what happened in this latest wave was not about speed alone. It was about what happened after the missile reached its target, and that is where things start to change. Iran has spent years developing its missile program under heavy sanctions and constant surveillance. Cut off from many advanced Western technologies, the country focused on one thing it could control: ballistic missiles. Reliable, scalable, and increasingly sophisticated. The Qassem missile is part of that evolution. Named after Qassem Soleimani, a key military figure, the system was designed as a next-generation strike weapon, not just to reach distant targets, but to survive modern interception systems, because that is the real challenge today. Hitting a target is no longer the hard part. Getting through defenses is. Systems like Israel's layered air defense rely on early detection, tracking, and interception at multiple stages: long-range radar, mid-course interceptors, terminal defense systems. Each layer is designed to reduce the chance of impact. So Iran needed a way to complicate that process, and the Qassem missile appears to do exactly that. At its core, it is a solid fuel ballistic missile. That matters because solid fuel allows for faster launch times and better mobility. No long fueling process, no extended preparation. It can be moved, deployed, and fired with minimal warning. Estimates suggest a range of around 1,400 kilometers. That puts most of Israel within reach from Iranian territory. Speed is another factor. Like most ballistic missiles, it travels at hypersonic velocity during parts of its flight. That means several times the speed of sound, reducing reaction time for any defense system tracking it. But speed alone does not explain what happened in this strike, because the defining feature appears to be its payload. Instead of carrying a single warhead, the missile is believed to deploy multiple submunitions. In simple terms, it splits. As it approaches its target area, the main body releases smaller explosive units, each one following its own trajectory. This creates a much wider impact zone. And more importantly, it creates confusion, because now, instead of tracking one object, defense systems are forced to track many. And that changes everything. But here is where the situation becomes even more complicated. Reports suggest that some of these submunitions behave like cluster warheads, designed not just to hit a single point, but to disperse over an area. This increases the chance of impact, even if some are intercepted. And it also increases the difficulty of predicting exactly where each piece will land. Which is why, in this recent strike, even with multiple interceptions reported, some impacts still reached populated areas, including locations near central Israel. And that raises a critical question. If defenses are designed to stop ballistic threats, why do they struggle when faced with systems like this? The answer is not a single weakness. It is a combination of factors that, when layered together, create a gap. First, detection. Ballistic missiles follow a predictable arc. That is how defense systems calculate interception points. But when a missile deploys multiple submunitions, that predictability begins to break down. Each object can have slight variations in speed and direction, turning one track into many. Second, time. Interceptors have seconds to respond. When a missile splits late, it compresses the decision window even further. Now systems must prioritize which objects to engage, and which ones to ignore. That is not a perfect process. Third, saturation. Even advanced defense systems have limits. They can track many targets, but interception capacity is not infinite. If enough objects appear at once, some will inevitably get through, not because the system fails, but because it is overwhelmed. And finally, geometry. Not every incoming object is equally dangerous. Some may be decoys, some may be debris, but distinguishing between them in real time is extremely difficult, which forces defenders to make rapid decisions with incomplete information. And sometimes those decisions come too late. But even this does not fully explain why analysts are paying such close attention to this specific missile, because the real concern is not just what it did, it is what it represents. This may have been its first reported combat use, but it is unlikely to be the last. And if systems like this continue to evolve, then the balance between offense and defense may begin to shift again. Because the next question is not whether defenses can intercept a missile. It is whether they can handle what comes after it breaks apart. And that is where the global implications begin. What happened in this strike is not just another escalation. It may be a preview. Because when a single missile turns into multiple threats in the final seconds of flight, the entire logic of missile defense begins to strain. And that has consequences far beyond one battlefield. In this case, Reports indicate that the missile was used during what Iran described as the 59th wave of coordinated strikes. That detail matters, because it suggests a pattern, not a one-off event. Repeated launches, layered attacks, increasing complexity with each wave. This is how modern missile doctrine evolves. Not through a single breakthrough, but through iteration under real conditions. And that raises the stakes significantly, because every launch is also a test of interception systems, a test of response times, a test of how quickly defenders can adapt. And in this exchange, both sides are learning in real time. For Israel, this presents a very specific challenge. Its air defense network is one of the most advanced in the world, designed to counter rockets, drones, and ballistic threats across multiple layers. But systems like these are optimized around known patterns, known trajectories, known behaviors. When a missile introduces fragmentation or multiple warheads late in flight, it forces those systems into unfamiliar territory. Now, instead of a clean intercept calculation, there is uncertainty. Which object carries the actual threat? Which ones are decoys? How many interceptors should be used per target? Those questions matter because interceptors are not unlimited. Each launch has a cost. Each decision has a trade-off. And in a prolonged conflict, resource management becomes just as important as technology. But this is not only a defensive problem, it also reshapes offensive strategy. Because weapons like the Qassem missile are not designed for precision alone. They are designed for probability. Instead of relying on a single accurate strike, they increase the likelihood that something will get through, even if defenses perform well overall. This is a shift from accuracy to saturation, from certainty to statistical pressure, and that changes how military planners think about both attack and defense. But the implications do not stop there, because other countries are watching closely. Nations with advanced missile programs and those developing them are studying these engagements in detail. They are looking at what worked, what failed, and where the gaps appeared, because the lesson is not limited to one region. If multi-warhead or submunition-based ballistic systems prove effective in penetrating defenses, similar designs could appear elsewhere, faster, more refined, harder to counter, and that creates a broader strategic concern. Missile defense systems around the world are built on certain assumptions. Track the threat early, predict its path, intercept before impact. But if the threat changes, form late in flight, those assumptions begin to weaken, which means future defenses may need to adapt, possibly with faster interceptors, more advanced sensors, or entirely new approaches to tracking and engagement. Some analysts already point to the need for systems that can handle distributed targets, not just single incoming objects. Others suggest integrating artificial intelligence to improve real-time decision-making under pressure, because human operators alone may not be able to process that level of complexity fast enough. And then there's the political dimension. Every new weapon system demonstrated in combat sends a message, not just to immediate adversaries, but to allies and rivals alike. It signals capability, intent, and technological progress. In this case, Iran is showing that its missile program is not static. It is evolving, adapting to modern defenses, and attempting to find ways around them. At the same time, Israel and its partners are likely analyzing every detail of these strikes, looking for patterns, identifying weaknesses, and preparing countermeasures. Because this is not a one-sided process. It is an ongoing cycle, action and reaction, measure and countermeasure. And that cycle tends to accelerate once new technologies are introduced into real combat. But there is another layer to this story, one that is often overlooked: civilian impact. Because when weapons disperse multiple submunitions over a wide area, controlling the outcome becomes more difficult. Even with intended targets, the risk to surrounding areas increases. And that is what makes these systems particularly concerning in densely populated regions. In this strike, reports indicate casualties and damage in urban areas. Numbers vary depending on sources. But estimates suggest that civilian deaths since the beginning of the conflict have reached into the high teens. Each incident adding pressure, not only militarily, but politically and internationally. Because the use of such weapons raises questions about escalation control, about proportional response, and about where the limits are. And those questions do not have easy answers. But they do shape how conflicts evolve. So when you look at the Qassem missile, it is not just about range or speed. It is about a shift in how missile threats are designed. From single-impact weapons to systems that complicate defense through fragmentation, timing, and saturation. And that shift forces a new reality, where stopping the missile is no longer the final step. Stopping what comes after it is, because in modern warfare, the most dangerous moment is no longer when the missile is detected. It is when it begins to break apart. And that is why weapons like this are forcing militaries around the world to rethink what effective defense really means.